Today I'm going to use these ingredients to make my seafood soup. It's going to be tomato based. I've got some large shrimp here and they're defrosting. I've got 4 cups of a seafood broth, and that's made from a seafood base. I've got some mushrooms, garlic, and that's about 6-7 cloves of garlic minced, thyme, a little bit of rosemary, some cilantro, carrots. Then I've got some celery, onion, bell pepper, and a jalapeno diced. I have 4 slices of pork belly cured bacon, which I actually cured myself. I've got more shrimp, and these are smaller shrimp, and some scallops. Here we have some stewed tomatoes, which were from my garden this summer, and I stewed them, vacuum sealed them, so now I'm starting to use them again. Some of the seasonings that are going to go on here include dill. This is the dill, pepper, red pepper flakes. I have a Creole seasoning, oregano, a couple of bay leaves, salt as needed to taste, and here I have some dried basil. The quantities of these varies, and I didn't actually measure. I just sort of looked at it and said, okay, let me cut this up. So, I mean, in general, this is about 6 or 7 mushroom slice. That's 1 carrot. That's just a handful of cilantro. That's about 3-4 stalks of celery. That's a half of a large onion. That's 1 orange bell pepper, and that's 1 large jalapeno. The spices, the dill, that's about a half a teaspoon. Pepper is about a half a teaspoon. Red pepper flakes, about a half a teaspoon. The Creole seasoning is a teaspoonful. The basil, that's approximately a teaspoon before crushing it. Salt, 2 bay leaves, as I said, and then the oregano, that's about a teaspoon of oregano. This bag of stewed tomatoes actually weighs 20 ounces. It's a lot of water in there, so a lot of that's I'm gonna have to reduce out of it. The amount of seafood that you use is gonna depend on you, what you want to eat. And for hubby and I, the number of shrimp and scallops that I have here will be adequate for a nice stew or soup. I cut my bacon into slices and little cubes for the thicker pieces, and I'm going to be adding that to my Dutch oven. In the Dutch oven, I just have a little coating of canola oil, and that's just to keep it from initially sticking. So I've added the bacon, and I'm just going to fry it up until it becomes nice and crispy and renders some of that fat, which I'm going to be using to cook some of the vegetables. Bacon is ready to pull off, and I'm going to leave a little bit of the fat in there, not a lot. And I'm going to reserve the bacon to the side for later. I left about a tablespoon of that bacon oil or grease, and I'm going to use that to saute my onion, celery, bell pepper, jalapeno, and garlic. I'm now going to add all of my veggies. And we'll let that saute for a little bit. I'll put the garlic in a little bit, not right now. The moisture that's in these veggies is going to help lift that fond off the bottom of my Dutch oven, so there's all that good bacon flavor. I'm going to be adding in my garlic. The other veggies have been in there for about 3 minutes. And I'll just swish that around in there. Then a couple of minutes, and the fragrance of that garlic is just, wow. I just love it. Love it, love it. Okay, now I'm going to put in my seafood broth, and we'll mix that around in there. I'm also going to add bay leaves, my thyme, and that little piece of rosemary. And we'll give that a stir. I'm not going to add the other seasonings until I get closer to putting the tomatoes in. And we're going to let that simmer for a little bit, and we'll come back. The seafood broth and vegetable mixture with garlic has been simmering for about 10 minutes, and now I'm going to add some tomatoes. The tomatoes that I'm using, I did take out of the vacuum seal package, and I took the scissors and just cut it up into bits. Adding the tomatoes. And once again, those are whole stewed tomatoes that were from my garden this past summer that I've diced up into smaller pieces. And I'm going to let that simmer away with the addition of some of the herbs. And first in, I'm going to put in the oregano, the basil, red pepper flakes, dill weed, Creole seasoning, and pepper. I'm going to reserve adding the salt till later, when I can go through and do a tasting and see how much I need to add. And that consideration is that in that celery salt, there's salt, and in the Creole seasoning, there's salt, and also in the seafood base. So I don't know what level of saltiness I'll be at by the time I get further into prepping this mixture. But in the meantime, we're going to put the cover on this baby and let it simmer away a little bit longer. And I've got these other tomatoes over there that are still sauteing a bit, and we'll add them as soon as they're ready. In addition, I have some of that vegetable mixture that I reduced a lot in the skillet, and I'm going to continue reducing it till it sort of goes into a fry stage. And then I'm going to also add that to my broth mixture. Doing this adds another level of depth of flavor to the seafood mixture, and should come out yummy. These are my stewed tomatoes, or some of my stewed tomatoes that I reduced a lot of the water out of it to make more like a paste. An afterthought, while I was looking through my pantry, I saw that I had these remaining little creamer potatoes in there, and I thought, you know, that might be a good addition to the soup. Instead of making a rice or making some type of a pasta, I'll just have these tomatoes in there. So I'm going to be adding those. I'm now adding that tomato paste. In addition, I'm going to add those potatoes that were an afterthought. And give that a stir around. In a lot of recipes for seafood stews and soups that are tomato based, it'll call for crushed tomatoes and tomato paste. So that tomato that I just added will serve part of the purpose of what a tomato paste would do. My seafood soup broth is simmering away, and I'm going to let it simmer for at least a half an hour, and that'll give it a chance to break down those stewed tomatoes a little bit more. And then I'll add the carrots and the mushrooms. Last to be added is going to be the shrimp and the scallops, and that'll actually be added probably in the last 10 minutes right before serving so that they don't overcook. It's been simmering for about 20-25 minutes. Then I'm going to add the carrots and the mushrooms. And we'll give that a stir. And we'll let that simmer again for another 15-20 minutes. I have my scallops and my shrimp, which have been cleaned, and I took the shell off, and I coated a little bit of fish sauce on it just to give it a little bit more salty and umami type flavor to it. Remember, I had that bacon that I crisped up earlier. I'm going to also be adding that to the tomato base. There's my bacon added. Give that a stir around. I added the cilantro. I'm now going to add the fish, the shrimp and scallops rather, to my stew. And it's not going to take long, probably about another couple of minutes before this is done. Dinner is ready.